I received a beautiful wedding invitation in the mail, recognizing my daughter Grace's handwriting. My heart swelled with pride, until I read the note inside. Dad, the best wedding gift you could give us would be to disappear from our lives permanently. The invitation was sent by mistake. Standing in my modest kitchen, holding the elegant card with trembling hands, I realized my only child wants me erased from her life. But Grace doesn't know her old father has one last construction project to complete. The invitation felt heavier than any beam I'd ever lifted during my 40 years in construction. My name is Sebastian, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd seen enough heartbreak when I lost my wife Margaret to cancer 3 years ago. But nothing prepares you for the moment your only child wishes you dead. I set the invitation on my small kitchen table and stared at the embossed letters. Grace Marie Whitmore to be. The Whitmore name carried weight in our city-old pharmaceutical money that stretched back generations. When Grace started dating Preston Whitmore III 2 years ago, I'd been happy for her. She deserved someone who could give her the life Margaret and I couldn't afford. The months after Margaret's death blurred together like rain on concrete. Hospital bills arrived faster than sympathy cards. The house we'd spent 30 years paying off became collateral for medical debt. I sold it 6 months after the funeral, moved into this one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Grace helped me pack her eyes red from crying. "It's just temporary, Dad," she'd promised. "Until we figure things out." That was the last time she'd been to my apartment. Our dinners became phone calls. Phone calls became texts. Texts became silence. 6 months before what would be her wedding day, I decided to visit the bank to refinance my truck loan. The teller, a cheerful woman named Brenda, recognized my last name. "Oh, you must be related to Grace. Such a tragic story, losing both parents so young. But look how well she's done for herself, marrying into the Whitmore family." My hands went cold on the counter. "Both parents?" Brenda's face flushed. "I'm sorry, I thought. Mrs. Whitmore mentioned at the charity luncheon that Preston's fiancée was an orphan. I must have misunderstood." I drove straight to Grace's luxury condo in the Riverside Tower, my decade-old Ford looking out of place among the Mercedes and BMWs in the resident parking. The doorman almost didn't let me up. "I'm Grace's father," I said. He checked his list, frowning. "She doesn't have any family listed on her emergency contacts." Grace answered the door, wearing a silk robe. I didn't recognize her face, perfectly made up at 2 in the afternoon. The apartment behind her looked like something from a magazine. White furniture, crystal vases, art I couldn't understand on the walls. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Am I dead, Grace?" Her face went through several expressions before settling on defiance. She let me in, but didn't offer me a seat. I stood in her pristine living room, feeling like mud tracked in on white carpet. "It's complicated," she began. "No, death is pretty simple. Either I'm breathing or I'm not." Grace walked to her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. "Preston's family would never accept you. Look at you, Dad. Your boots have cement stains. You're wearing the same flannel shirt you've had since I was in high school. You drive a truck older than some of their house staff. So you killed me off." I gave them the father they expected me to have. Someone respectable. Someone who belonged in their world. I noticed the jewelry then. Diamond earrings that caught the light. A tennis bracelet that cost more than my truck. Designer purses lined up on a shelf like trophies. "Your marketing job pay for all this?" Grace's jaw tightened. "Preston's family has been generous. They want me to look the part. The part of what, an orphan?" She spun around, her robe swirling. "The part of someone who deserves their son. Mom always wanted more for me, Dad. She died in a county hospital because we couldn't afford Cedar Medical. She wore the same winter coat for 15 years because every extra penny went to my college fund. Don't you think she'd want me to have this?" I felt Margaret's absence like a physical weight. "Your mother wanted you to be happy, Grace, not to be someone else." "I am happy. Look at this ring." She thrust her left hand forward. The diamond was the size of a grape, surrounded by smaller stones. This is my chance at the life she dreamed of. On her glass coffee table, I spotted legal documents. My construction experience included enough contract work to recognize terms and conditions when I saw them. Trust fund paperwork, morality clauses, family approval requirements. They're paying you to be with him. It's not like that. Preston loves me. His family just wants to ensure I'm the right fit. There are expectations. Like having the right kind of dead father. Grace pulled out a checkbook from a drawer. Her movements were sharp, angry. How much do you want? Excuse me. To make this easy, to go away. 50,000. You could retire somewhere warm. Florida, maybe. Start fresh. She wrote the check before I could answer, her handwriting still the same as when she'd signed Father's Day cards. Take it. Move away. Let me live my life. Everyone wins. I looked at my daughter, searching for the little girl who used to ride on my shoulders at construction sites, wearing her tiny hard hat. I don't want your money, Grace. It's not my money. It's freedom, for both of us. I left the check on her table. At the door, I turned back. Your mother would be heartbroken. Grace's voice followed me out. Mom's dead, Dad. She doesn't get a vote anymore. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a mineshaft. In the lobby, the doorman gave me a sympathetic look, as if he'd seen this scene before. Rich kids erasing their poor relations. An old story in a building like this. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring up at the tower. Somewhere up there, my daughter was planning a life that required my death. The construction worker in me understood foundations. Grace was building her future on a lie, and every contractor knows what happens to structures built on false ground. They collapse. I started the engine and drove not home, but to Riverside Cemetery. Margaret Stone was simple, the way she'd wanted. Beloved wife and mother. I knelt on the grass, my bad knee protesting. What do I do, Maggie? Our little girl has lost her way. The wind moved through the oak trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice. Margaret always said I fixed things other people broke. Buildings, businesses, people's homes after storms. But how do you fix a daughter who's decided to bury you while you're still breathing? I stayed until the sun started setting, painting the sky the color of the salmon Margaret used to cook on Sundays. By the time I stood to leave, I'd made my decision. Grace thought her old construction worker father was too simple to fight back, too poor to matter, too proud to make waves. She was wrong on all counts. If my daughter wanted to play dead, I'd show her what resurrection looked like. And I'd use the only tools I'd ever trusted, the ones that built my life, and would now rebuild hers. Truth, evidence, and patience. The wedding was 6 months away. More than enough time for one last construction project. This time, I wouldn't be building something new. I'd be doing demo work, carefully taking apart the lies, until only the truth remained standing. Grace thought she could erase Sebastian, the construction worker. She was about to learn that some foundations run too deep to demolish. Sleep became a stranger after that visit to Grace's apartment. I'd lie in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words. The best wedding gift you could give us would be to disappear. At 3 a.m, those words felt like hammers on bone. 5 months before the wedding, I found myself back at Riverside Cemetery. The morning mist hung low between the headstones, giving everything a dreamlike quality. I brought Margaret's favorite flowers, yellow roses from the grocery store. Nothing fancy, but she'd never cared about fancy. She's erasing me, Maggie, I told the granite stone. Like I'm something shameful. Like 40 years of 16-hour days mean nothing, because I wore steel-toed boots instead of Italian leather. An elderly woman approached from the next row of graves, moving slowly with a carved wooden cane. Her black dress and pearl necklace suggested old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. I apologize for intruding, she said, but I couldn't help overhearing. It's a cruel thing when family forgets where they came from. My wife always said everyone's fighting their own battle, I replied. Guess my daughter's fighting hers by pretending I don't exist. The woman settled onto the bench near Margaret's grave with practiced grace. Eleanor Whitmore, she introduced herself. I'm visiting my husband. He's been gone 8 years next month. The name hit me like a 2x4. Preston's grandmother. I kept my face neutral, a skill learned from decades of negotiating with difficult clients. Sebastian, I said simply. Sorry for your loss. Thank you, though I sometimes think the living cause more grief than the dead. She gazed at a massive marble monument several rows over. My grandson is getting married soon. The bride seems lovely, but there's something hollow about a girl with no family, no roots. She claims to be an orphan, but orphans have histories too. Photos, stories. She has nothing but silk dresses and practiced smiles. My throat felt tight. Maybe she's trying to forget a painful past. Perhaps. But in my experience, people who erase their history are usually hiding something worse than poverty or pain. Eleanor stood using her cane for support. We all have our roots. Cutting them off doesn't make us grow stronger. It just makes us more likely to fall when the winds come. She walked away, leaving me alone with thoughts suddenly sharp as saw blades. Eleanor Whitmore had doubts about Grace. Maybe I wasn't the only one who could see the cracks in her foundation. Back home, I called my younger brother Marcus in Chicago. We'd talked maybe twice since Margaret's funeral, but blood runs thicker than time. Seb. That you? Jesus, what time is it? I need your help, Marcus. You dying. Already dead, according to Grace. The silence stretched between us. Marcus had become a private investigator after leaving the Marines good at finding things people wanted hidden. Tell me everything, he said finally. I did. Every word, every detail, from the mistaken invitation to the $50,000 check I'd left on Grace's table. Marcus listened, without interrupting a skill from his military days. She's playing a dangerous game, he said when I finished. Rich families like the Whitmores, they've got lawyers who eat people for breakfast. If they find out she's lying. That's what I'm counting on. But I need to know more first. Can you dig quietly? For you, brother, I'll dig so quiet they'll think it's mice in the walls. Give me a few weeks. After hanging up, I went to the storage unit where I'd moved things after selling the house. Box after box of memories. Grace's baby shoes. Report cards covered in gold stars. Handmade Father's Day cards with crooked hearts and misspelled words. Photos of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations to state parks because Disney was too expensive. I spent hours scanning everything, creating digital copies. My daughter might want me dead, but I'd preserve proof of the life she was trying to erase. Every image told a truth she now denied. A little girl on her father's shoulders at construction sites. A teenager rolling her eyes but smiling as I taught her to change a tire. A college student hugging both parents at graduation, tears of pride on all three faces. The next morning, I went to Bedford First National and opened a safety deposit box. Into it went flash drives of photos, copies of Grace's birth certificate, with my name clearly listed as Father Margaret's death certificate, showing Grace as surviving daughter. Documentation of a real life lived ready for when truth became necessary. 2 weeks later, Marcus called back. You sitting down? What did you find? Your future son-in-law has a trust fund worth about $50 million. But here's the kicker, it's got more strings attached than a marionette. Morality clause says any scandal involving his spouse forfeits the whole thing. No criminal activity, no fraud, no behavior that brings disgrace to the Whitmore name. Define disgrace. That's the beauty of old money contracts. They don't define it. The family board decides. 5 members, including Grandma Eleanor. Takes 3 votes to invoke the clause. I thought of Eleanor at the cemetery talking about roots and hollow girls. Anything else? Yeah, and you're not going to like this. Grace has been living way above her means for the past year. Designer clothes, jewelry trips. Unless Preston's been bankrolling her directly, which I doubt, because his accountant would have recorded it. She's getting money somewhere else. Her job pays well. Not that well. I've got a contact looking into her employment situation. Should know more soon. Marcus paused. Seb, whatever you're planning, be careful. Grace is playing with fire, and when this burns down, you don't want to be standing too close. I'm her father. I'm already standing in the flames. 3 days later, Marcus sent an encrypted email. My hands shook as I read it. Grace had been embezzling from her marketing firm. Small amounts at first hidden in expense reports and vendor payments. But over the past year, she'd stolen close to $75,000. The company hadn't noticed yet, their accounting department overwhelmed and understaffed. I stared at the evidence on my laptop screen. My daughter, the girl I'd raised to value honesty above all else, had become a thief. Not because she was hungry or desperate, but because she wanted to look rich before she became rich. Instead of confronting her, I printed everything and added it to the safety deposit box. A contractor learns patience from concrete. You can't rush the curing process. You wait, you watch, and when the time is right, you build. That evening, I sat on my small balcony with a beer, watching the sun set over the city. Somewhere across town, Grace was probably trying on wedding dresses that cost more than I made in 6 months, planning flowers and cakes and celebrations that required my absence. She thought I'd simply vanish because she wished it. But I'd spent 40 years turning empty lots into homes, broken foundations into solid ground. My daughter had forgotten where she came from, but I hadn't. The preparation phase had begun. Like any good construction project, it would take time planning and the right tools. But when it was finished, everyone would see what happened when you tried to build a life on lies. Grace wanted me gone. Instead, I'd become the ghost that haunted her perfect wedding. Not through malice or revenge, but through something far more powerful. The truth she thought she'd buried with her fictional father. The cemetery visit kept replaying in my mind. Eleanor Whitmore, searching for authenticity in a girl made of artifice. If Preston's grandmother already had doubts, how many others were questioning my daughter's stories? I picked up my phone and scrolled through old contacts until I found Patricia Chen, Margaret's best friend from her nursing days. Patricia had held my wife's hand during the final treatments, been there when the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. Sebastian. Oh my God, how are you? I've been meaning to call. I'm all right, Pat. Listen, I need to ask you something about Margaret's last days. Of course, anything. Did she write any letters? Maybe things she wanted Grace to have later. Patricia's voice softened. She did. Several, actually. She gave them to me for safekeeping. Said she didn't want Grace to find them too soon. Wanted her to be ready. Do you still have them? In my safe at home. Margaret made me promise to give them to Grace when the time was right. Why is everything okay? I chose my words carefully. Grace is getting married. I think now might be the right time. Oh, how wonderful, Margaret would be so happy. Should I send them to Grace directly? Actually, could I pick them up? I'd like to make sure she gets them personally. We arranged to meet that weekend. Another piece of truth to add to my growing collection. Margaret's own words, whatever they might say, would speak louder than any accusation I could make. The next morning brought an unexpected gift. While buying groceries, I ran into Carl Morrison, my former construction foreman. Carl was a mountain of a man with hands like sledgehammers and a heart even bigger. Boss, damn good to see you. His handshake nearly crushed my fingers. Heard you sold the company. Enjoying retirement. Something like that. What are you up to these days? Working maintenance at the Whitmore Country Club. Good pay, easy work. Mostly making sure rich folks' golf carts run smooth. He grinned. Actually, they're setting up for some big society wedding there. Preston Whitmore III. You believe that name, the third, like he's royalty or something. The universe had just handed me an inside man. That's my daughter's wedding. Carl's face went through several expressions. Grace is marrying into the Whitmores. Good for her. You must be proud. It's complicated. Something in my tone must have warned him. Carl had worked for me for 20 years through good times and bad. He knew my voices like a musician knows notes. You need anything, boss, you just say the word. I owe you more than I can ever repay. He did. 5 years ago, Carl's son developed leukemia. Insurance covered some treatment, but not the experimental therapy that ended up saving his life. I'd emptied my savings to help, told Carl it was a bonus for years of good work. He knew better. Actually, Carl, I might need some information about the wedding preparations. Nothing intrusive, just keeping tabs on things. Carl studied me with eyes that had seen plenty of job sites and knew when blueprints didn't match reality. She's not inviting you, is she? Like I said, complicated. I'll keep my eyes open. Subtle like. These rich folks, they talk like the help isn't even there. You'd be amazed what I hear while fixing a toilet or adjusting a chandelier. We exchanged phone numbers. Another ally in place, this one with access to the very heart of Grace's deception. That weekend, I met Patricia at a small cafe downtown. She hadn't aged well since Margaret's death, grief adding lines to her face and gray to her hair. She pushed a manila envelope across the table. 5 letters, she said. Margaret wrote them during her last month. 1 for Grace's wedding day, 1 for when she has her first child, 1 for her 30th birthday, 1 for her 40th, and 1 for if she ever loses her way. You read them? Never. Margaret trusted me to keep them safe, not to pry. Patricia stirred her coffee absently. How is Grace? I tried calling a few times after the funeral, but she never returned my messages. She's building a new life. Without you? Apparently. Patricia's face hardened. Margaret would hate that. She talked about you constantly during treatment. How you worked double shifts to pay for her medications. How you sold your father's watch to buy her that special wig when she lost her hair. She worried Grace would forget those sacrifices. Seems she was right to worry. What are you going to do? I held the envelope like it contained holy relics, which, in a way, it did. I'm going to remind her who she is, who we all were together, before it's too late. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Margaret always said you could fix anything. Don't let her be wrong about that. Driving home with the letters on my passenger seat, I thought about foundations again. Grace had built her new life by erasing the old one. But you can't just pour concrete over unstable ground and expect it to hold. The past has a way of breaking through cracks, spreading like lightning, until the whole structure fails. My daughter thought she'd killed me off a convenient fiction to smooth her way into high society. She didn't realize that some ghosts don't need death to haunt. Some ghosts are just patient fathers waiting for the right moment to remind their children that you can change your name, change your address, change your entire story. But you can't change where you came from. And Grace was about to learn that the hard way. 3 months before the wedding, I sat in my truck outside the Whitmore Country Club, watching members in pastel polos disappear into a building that looked more like a palace than a place to hit tiny balls into holes. Carl had texted me, "Big wedding meeting today. Grace here with the Whitmore women. I'm fixing the air conditioning in the same room." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. Grace stood at a presentation board covered in fabric swatches and flower arrangements addressing a semicircle of elegantly dressed women. Even in the grainy maintenance room angle of Carl's secret photo, I could see my daughter commanding the room with confidence I'd never seen before. Another text. She's telling them about her father again. "You're a Harvard professor now. Died saving kids from a fire." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. A Harvard professor. Margaret would have laughed at that one. She used to joke that I couldn't spell Harvard, let alone teach there. And dying in a fire I'd spent 40 years avoiding job site accidents, only to be killed off in my daughter's imagination as some kind of hero. Carl called me that evening after his shift. "Boss, you need to hear this. I was replacing filters in the ventilation system right above the main dining room. Your daughter was having lunch with Preston's mother and his sister Jennifer. And Mrs. Whitmore asked about family traditions for the wedding. You know, something borrowed, something blue, that stuff." Grace starts crying real theatrical tears, talking about how she wishes her parents could be there. Says you were this big philanthropist, built schools in Africa or something. Had a foundation for underprivileged kids. I built a garage for the church once. Yeah, well, apparently that's transformed into a whole charitable empire. But here's the interesting part. The sister Jennifer, she's not buying it. Kept asking specific questions. What university did he teach at? What was the foundation called? Which fire exactly? Grace got flustered, said it was too painful to discuss details. Jennifer Whitmore. I remembered Preston mentioning his sister was a journalist for the city paper. Journalists had instincts about lies, like contractors had instincts about bad lumber. You could feel when something wasn't true to the grain. There's more, Carl continued. They've hired some fancy genealogist to create a family tree display for the wedding. Big artistic thing showing both bloodlines merging. Grace looked ready to vomit when they mentioned it. A genealogist. Official records. Paper trails that led to construction permits, and tax documents not Harvard and humanitarian awards. My daughter had spun her web of lies without considering that weddings, especially society weddings, came with expectations of proof. Carl, I need you to find out who this genealogist is. Already did. Lady named Dr. Patricia Summers. Has an office downtown, specializes in what she calls heritage documentation for significant unions. Whatever that means. It means Grace is about to have a problem. The next morning, I put on my only suit, the one I'd bought for Margaret's funeral, and drove to Dr. Summers' office. The receptionist looked at me like I'd wandered in from a construction site, which wasn't far from the truth. I don't have an appointment, I said, but I'm researching the same family line Dr. Summers is working on, the Patterson family. I used Margaret's maiden name, knowing it would appear in any search of Grace's maternal line. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Dr. Patricia Summers, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind designer glasses. Her office walls were covered with framed family trees that looked more like art than documentation. Mr. Patterson, you said I am working on a Patterson line, though client confidentiality prevents me from discussing specifics. Of course, I'm actually from a distant branch trying to connect some dots. My grandmother was Margaret Patterson, born in Ohio, 1943. Dr. Summers typed something into her computer. Interesting. I have a Margaret Patterson in my current research, but she was born in Indiana, 1952. Married to a Harvard professor named Sebastian Clark. I supplied, pulling a name from thin air. Yes, Sebastian Clark. Do you know him? Only by reputation. Different branch of the family, but we always heard stories about the professor who died in that terrible fire. Saving orphans, wasn't it? Dr. Summers frowned. The records I have say it was a school fire, but I'm having trouble verifying the details. Harvard has no employment records for a Sebastian Clark in their history or philosophy departments. And I can't find any news accounts of a professor dying in a fire while saving children. It should have been national news. Family stories get embellished over time. Indeed. But for a wedding of this caliber, the Whitmores expect accuracy. I've been asked to verify everything through primary sources. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, I'm having trouble verifying anything about the bride's father. It's as if he didn't exist before the story started. Maybe he used a different name professionally. I've considered that. But there are no death certificates, no obituaries, no academic publications. A Harvard professor who built schools in Africa should have left some paper trail. The bride insists all records were lost in a house fire after his death, but that seems... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Statistically unlikely. I left Dr. Summers with more ammunition than I'd hoped for. The genealogist already had doubts, already saw the holes in Grace's story. All I had to do was make sure those holes got a little bigger. That evening, I created a simple website, the Sebastian Clark Memorial Foundation. Just a landing page with a vague mission statement about education and children. But I made sure to backdate its registration to 5 years ago, knowing Dr. Summers would find it and note the discrepancy. Grace claimed the foundation had existed for decades. This digital breadcrumb would prove otherwise. Marcus called with an update on his investigation. Your daughter's been busy, Seb. That marketing firm she works for, they're about to discover some significant accounting discrepancies. She's been inflating vendor invoices and pocketing the difference. But here's where it gets interesting. Last week, she created a purchase order for a company that doesn't exist. 50 grand for consultation services from a firm registered in Delaware. Want to guess who owns that shell company? Grace. Bingo. But she was sloppy. Used her personal email to set it up. IT department's gonna find it in their next audit, which is scheduled for 2 weeks after the wedding. So she's trying to steal enough for one big score before becoming Mrs. Whitmore. Looks like it. But there's more. That co-worker of hers, kid named Timothy Chen, she's been setting him up to take the fall, putting his digital signature on documents using his access codes when he's out sick. When this blows up, all fingers point to him. My stomach turned. Bad enough my daughter had become a thief. Now she was willing to destroy an innocent person to cover her tracks. Can we prove it's her and not him? Already working on it. My tech guy says her computer leaves different metadata than his. Plus, she's been doing some of this from her home IP address. Stupid, but criminals usually are when they think they're untouchable. I hung up, feeling sick. Grace hadn't just lost her way. She'd deliberately chosen a dark path and was dragging others down with her. Carl texted me photos from the country club throughout the week. Grace was there almost daily now, overseeing preparations. The wedding would be massive, 300 guests, and orchestra flowers flown in from Ecuador. In one photo, she stood with Preston in the garden where the ceremony would take place. He looked at her with pure adoration. She looked past him, possibly at the photographer they were directing her expression, calculating. Poor kid has no idea, Carl had written. Heard him telling his groomsmen she's the most honest person he's ever met. The irony was sharp enough to cut. Preston Whitmore, the third heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, thought he'd found an honest woman. Instead, he'd found my daughter who'd killed me off for convenience and was robbing her employer to maintain an illusion. But the wedding machinery was in motion now. Invitations had been sent, the date set in stone. Grace probably felt safe, her lies locked in place by social expectation and Preston's blind faith. She didn't know about the genealogist's doubts, about Marcus's evidence, about the ghost of her father, gathering proof of who she really was. 3 months to go. The foundation of her false life was already cracking. Soon, I'd help it crumble completely. Not out of cruelty or revenge, but because I'd raised her to build true, and watching her build false went against everything I'd taught her with hammer and nail sweat and sacrifice. She thought she was marrying into the Whitmores. She didn't realize she was just adding more weight to a structure already failing. And when it collapsed, I'd be there. Not to gloat or say I told you so, but to remind her that when everything falls apart, family is what helps you rebuild. Even the family you tried to bury. Carl's final text that week was a photo of the seating chart. Table after table of society names carefully arranged by social hierarchy. At the bottom, in Grace's handwriting, a note. Security alert, Sebastian Mitchell claims to be father possible stalker. Do not admit. She'd even gotten my last name wrong. Mitchell instead of Miller. As if erasing me so thoroughly she'd forgotten the name on my driver's license. The name on her birth certificate. The name she'd carried for 22 years before deciding it wasn't good enough. I saved the photo. Evidence of how far my daughter had fallen. When the time came, she'd need to see it. Need to understand that every lie she told was another brick in the wall between us. And walls built on lies always come tumbling down. 3 months. 90 days. 2,160 hours. Until my daughter married a man she was deceiving, while wearing a dress bought with stolen money, and surrounded by people mourning a father who was very much alive. But I'd built things all my life. I could wait a little longer to unbuild this. After all, the best demolition work is done carefully, one beam at a time, until the moment when the whole structure has no choice but to fall. 6 weeks before the wedding, I discovered exactly how deep my daughter's deception ran. Marcus had sent me a package of documents that made my hands shake as I read them. Grace hadn't just been stealing from her employer. She'd created an entire fictional charity, the Margaret Foundation, supposedly established in her mother's memory. She's been soliciting donations from Preston's family friends, Marcus explained over the phone, telling them it provides medical equipment to underfunded hospitals, the same hospitals that couldn't save her sainted mother. How much? About 30,000 so far. Small donations, nothing to trigger suspicion. But Seb, she's planning a big fundraising push at the wedding. Pledge cards at every table. Preston's grandmother already committed to a 100,000 matching grant. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the evidence. Fake letterhead with Margaret's picture. A mission statement that twisted my wife's death into a money-making scheme. Bank accounts in Delaware, transfers to Grace's personal shopping accounts. My daughter hadn't just dishonored her father. She was grave robbing her mother. There's more, Marcus continued. She's been pushing Preston to invest his personal trust fund money into the charity before the wedding. Wants to announce it as their first act as a married couple. If he does that before discovering it's fake, he'd be complicit in fraud. The Whitmore family would invoke that morality clause. Exactly. She's not just conning them. She's setting Preston up to lose everything alongside her. That changed things. Preston might be naive, but he didn't deserve to have his life destroyed because he fell in love with the wrong woman. I'd been focused on exposing Grace's lies, but now I needed to protect innocent people from the explosion when her house of cards collapsed. The next morning, I drove to the Secretary of State's office. If Grace wanted to use her mother's name for fraud, she'd learned that two could play at paperwork. I filed articles of incorporation for the Margaret Foundation, a legitimate nonprofit dedicated to supporting families dealing with terminal illness through practical assistance and emotional support. The clerk date-stamped the documents. As of 9:47 a.m., the Margaret Foundation legally existed, and I was its founding director. Grace's version was now officially fraud. I spent the afternoon setting up the legitimate foundation properly. A real bank account. A simple website with Margaret's favorite photo, the one from our 25th anniversary, where her smile could light up a room. A mission statement that actually honored her memory, helping families afford final moments together, providing gas cards for hospital visits, covering missed wages for caregivers. My phone rang. Carl. Boss, you need to know something. Grace just had a meeting with Preston's family lawyer. She's pushing to have the charity announcement moved up. Wants to do it at the rehearsal dinner instead of the wedding. Why? From what I overheard, some company audit has her spooked. She's trying to move up her timeline. The audit. Marcus had mentioned it was scheduled for 2 weeks after the wedding. If Grace knew it was coming, she was trying to grab as much money as possible before fleeing. Maybe she planned to blame the charity fraud on hackers or claim identity theft. With Preston's resources, she could disappear, reinvent herself again somewhere else. Carl, I need you to do something for me. Can you accidentally leave some paperwork where Jennifer Whitmore might find it? The journalist's sister, sure. She's always snooping around anyway. What kind of paperwork? Just a simple business card. For the Margaret Foundation. The real one. I gave him the website address and registration details. Jennifer was already suspicious. A breadcrumb like that would send her investigating, and journalists knew how to find incorporation documents. That evening, I visited Patricia Chen at the hospital where she still worked, where Margaret had spent her final days. The oncology ward hadn't changed much. Same pale green walls, same antiseptic smell that brought back memories I'd rather forget. Sebastian. Patricia looked surprised to see me. Is everything all right? I need your help, Pat. It's about those letters from Margaret, but also something else. I explained about the fake charity, watching Patricia's face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally determination. She's using Margaret's death to scam people. That's disgusting. I need someone respectable to serve on the board of the real foundation. Someone who actually knew Margaret, who can speak to what she'd really want." Patricia didn't hesitate. "Of course. Margaret saved my faith in nursing when I was ready to quit. She made dying seem like just another room in life's house, nothing to fear. If Grace is dishonoring that memory, there's one more thing. If anyone contacts you about Margaret's final days, especially a journalist named Jennifer Whitmore, I need you to tell the truth. All of it, including how we paid the bills." Patricia understood immediately. The second mortgage, selling the house, your father's watch, everything you sacrificed. Everything we sacrificed. Margaret made her own choices, too. She did. Refused the expensive treatment that might have bought more time because she wanted to leave something for Grace's future. Patricia's voice turned hard. And this is how Grace honors that gift. I left the hospital feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because the real Margaret Foundation now had legitimacy, a board member who'd known its namesake. Heavier because every step toward truth meant accepting how far my daughter had fallen. Marcus called again that night. The IT audit got moved up. Timothy Chen's supervisor found some discrepancies and wants them resolved before month's end. That's 3 weeks from now. Before the wedding. By about a week. Grace must know. She's been shredding documents, deleting files. But here's the thing about digital forensics. Nothing's ever really gone. My guy already recovered enough to bury her. What about Timothy, the kid she's setting up? I've got everything documented. When this breaks, he'll be cleared. Might even have a nice wrongful termination lawsuit if they try to blame him first. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. Grace's timeline was accelerating, but so was mine. The question became not whether her lies would be exposed, but whether innocent people would be protected when they were. 3 days later, Carl reported that Jennifer Whitmore had indeed found the business card he'd accidentally dropped near her favorite reading chair at the club. She asked me about it. Real casual-like. Said she was always interested in medical charities because of her grandmother's cancer battle. I played dumb, said I must have picked it up somewhere. That afternoon, the real Margaret Foundation website got its first unique visitor from a Whitmore Corporation IP address. Jennifer was investigating. Good. The more she found, the more questions she'd ask. And Grace couldn't claim confusion or identity theft when the real foundation predated her fake one. Preston, meanwhile, remained oblivious. Carl sent photos of him at the club practicing his wedding vows on the veranda. The poor boy had written them himself, pages of promises about truth, trust, and building a life on honest foundations. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. I spent my evenings writing content for the Margaret Foundation website. Real stories about families we'd known during Margaret's treatment. The single mother who slept in her car because she couldn't afford a hotel near the hospital. The grandfather who sold his truck to pay for his wife's medications. The teenager who dropped out of school to care for his dying father. These were Margaret's people. The ones who suffered quietly, who sacrificed without recognition, who faced death with dignity, despite empty pockets. If Grace wanted to invoke her mother's memory, she should have to face what that memory really meant. A week before the audit was scheduled, I got an unexpected call. Eleanor Whitmore. Mr. Miller, this is Eleanor Whitmore. We met at Riverside Cemetery some months ago. My throat went dry. Mrs. Whitmore, how did you get my number? I'm old Mr. Miller, not stupid. When a genealogist can't verify a single fact about my future granddaughter-in-law's father, when a new charity appears with familiar incorporation details, when my journalist granddaughter starts asking careful questions. Well, I was solving puzzles before these children were born. I don't know what you mean. Don't insult my intelligence. Grace Patterson is your daughter. The question is, why does she claim you're dead? I stayed silent, not trusting my voice. Eleanor continued. I've seen many things in my 78 years. Social climbers, fortune hunters, even a few genuine love matches that crossed class lines. But I've never seen a child erase a living parent. That takes a special kind of cruelty. Or desperation. Perhaps. Will you be attending the wedding, Mr. Miller? I wasn't invited. In fact, there's a security alert with my name on it. Eleanor made a sound that might have been a laugh. Security can be overruled by family, especially grandmothers who sign the checks. Consider this your invitation, Mr. Miller. I believe every wedding needs at least one honest person in attendance. She hung up before I could respond. Eleanor Whitmore had just offered me a way into the wedding. But more than that, she'd revealed that Grace's deception wasn't as airtight as she believed. The Whitmore matriarch smelled a rat, and she was setting her own trap. 6 weeks until the wedding. The audit in 3 weeks would reveal Grace's embezzlement. The fake charity was already attracting scrutiny. The genealogist had doubts. Jennifer was investigating. And now Eleanor Whitmore was playing her own game. Grace had spun a web of lies so complex she couldn't see all the spiders crawling toward the center. She thought money and status could replace truth and family. She was about to learn that some foundations can't be faked, some roots can't be cut, and some fathers can't be buried while they still breathe. The financial web she'd woven was impressive in its complexity. But I'd spent 40 years reading blueprints, seeing how every beam connected to every other beam. I could see the weak points in her structure, the places where one tap would bring it all down. 6 weeks. That's all the time she had left to pretend Sebastian Miller didn't exist. After that, everyone would know exactly who I was. The father she couldn't kill. The ghost she couldn't bury. The truth she couldn't escape. 2 weeks before the wedding, the careful structure of lies Grace had built began showing serious cracks. I sat in my truck outside the Whitmore Country Club, reading a text from Carl. Emergency meeting happening now. Jennifer found something. Grace is in full panic mode. My phone rang. Marcus. The genealogist just called Jennifer Whitmore. Told her she can't complete the family tree because nothing about Grace's father checks out. Harvard has no record of him. The fire he supposedly died in never happened. The charity he ran doesn't exist in any registry before last month. How's Grace explaining it? She's not. She's claiming Dr. Summers is incompetent, demanding they hire someone else. But here's the beautiful part. Jennifer already did her own research. Found the real Margaret Foundation. Found your construction company records. Found a very much alive Sebastian Miller, who looks remarkably like the man in Grace's hidden family photos. The photos. Despite claiming I was dead, Grace had kept some family pictures. Probably hidden away, but Jennifer was thorough. One of the advantages of investigating someone living in your social circle. Access to their private spaces during gatherings. Carl called an hour later with a play-by-play of the meeting's aftermath. Preston's asking questions now. Real pointed ones. Where are your father's colleagues? Why no obituary? Why can't we find his publications? Grace tried the tears again, but they're not working like they used to. What about Eleanor? The old lady just sat there knitting quiet as death. But boss, I've worked enough jobs to know when someone's planning demolition. She had that look. That evening, I met with Patricia Chen at a small restaurant near the hospital. She'd been contacted by Jennifer Whitmore earlier that day. I told her everything, Patricia said. About Margaret's treatment, the bills, how you worked double shifts to pay for her care, about the house you sold, even about the time you gave blood twice a week for the extra money when Margaret needed that experimental drug. How did Jennifer react? She took notes. Lots of notes. Then she asked why Grace would claim you were dead. I told her to ask Grace. My phone buzzed. An unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Whitmore Corporation. Mr. Miller, this is Jennifer Whitmore. I think we should talk. We arranged to meet the next morning at a coffee shop downtown, far from the country club and prying eyes. Jennifer arrived, looking like she'd slept as poorly as I had, her usually perfect appearance, slightly frayed around the edges. I've been investigating Grace for weeks, she said without preamble. At first it was just journalist instinct. Something felt off. But the more I dug, the worse it got. She spread papers on the table between us. Printouts of Grace's social media showing a carefully curated life. The fake charity documents. Employment records that didn't match her stories. And photos. Dozens of photos Grace had posted over the years, always cropping out faces. But Jennifer had found the originals through Preston's cloud storage. "That's you." She pointed to a family Christmas photo from 5 years ago. Very much alive. Very much her father. "Yes." "Why is she doing this?" I told her about the visit to Grace's apartment, the $50,000 check, the declaration that I didn't fit the Whitmore world. Jennifer listened, her expression cycling through disgust and pity. "She's also stealing," Jennifer said quietly. "I have a source at her company. They're about to discover significant embezzlement. And this fake charity, she's convinced several of Preston's friends to make large donations. That's wire fraud." "I know." Jennifer leaned back, studying me. "You've known all along. You're investigating your own daughter. I'm trying to save her from herself, and save your brother from her. Preston won't believe it. He loves her, thinks she hung the moon. Then we need proof he can't deny." Jennifer nodded slowly. "The rehearsal dinner is in 10 days. Grace is planning to announce the charity there, get people to commit funds. If she does that, she adds more victims to her fraud, makes it harder for Preston to extract himself without scandal." "Exactly." Jennifer pulled out her phone. "I've been recording conversations. Legal in this state if one party consents. Want to hear how your daughter describes your death?" I didn't, but I needed to. Jennifer played a recording from a Whitmore family dinner. Grace's voice theatrical with false grief. "Daddy was lecturing at Harvard when the fire broke out at the elementary school next door. He didn't hesitate, just ran straight into the building. They say he saved 14 children before the ceiling collapsed. The firefighters found him shielding the last 2 with his body. The president of Harvard gave the eulogy himself. I had to stop her. The man she described bore no resemblance to me. I'd never set foot on Harvard's campus, never saved anyone from a fire, never had a university president know my name. But the worst part was how easily the lies flowed, how she'd crafted this elaborate fiction to replace the simple truth of a construction worker who loved his family. There's more, Jennifer said gently. She's been telling people you left her and her mother a massive inheritance, that she doesn't touch it out of respect for your memory, lives only on her salary. While stealing from her employer. And planning to steal from mine. Jennifer's voice turned hard. My grandmother built Whitmore Pharmaceuticals from nothing. My father expanded it. Preston will run it someday. I won't let Grace destroy our family's legacy. What do you need from me? Everything. Every document, every proof of her lies. But also, she hesitated. I need you to be at the wedding. I wasn't invited. There's actually a security alert. Grandmother Eleanor has already handled that. She wants you there too. Says a wedding built on lies needs at least one truth-teller present. We spent the next hour planning. Jennifer would continue her investigation, focusing on the financial crimes. I would prepare a comprehensive package of evidence about Grace's personal deceptions. Together, we'd ensure Preston learned the truth before legally binding himself to my daughter. As Jennifer prepared to leave, she asked, "How does it feel investigating your own child?" Like cutting off my own arm to save my life. Necessary, but it'll hurt forever. She squeezed my shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're a good father. Grace is lucky to have you, even if she's too blind to see it. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop, watching normal families go about their day. A father helping his daughter with homework. A mother laughing at her son's joke. Simple moments Grace and I used to share now, buried under designer clothes and deadly lies. That evening, Carl reported more chaos from the country club. Grace is demanding they move the wedding up. Says she's got a business opportunity that requires her to be married for tax purposes. Preston's confused, but going along with it. His mother's suspicious. Can they move it? Not easily. Vendors are booked, guests have travel plans. But Grace is pushing hard, offering to pay rush fees out of pocket. Grace could feel the walls closing in. The audit, the genealogist's questions, Jennifer's investigation. She knew time was running out. Like a desperate gambler, she was trying to grab her winnings and run before the house caught on. But the house always wins. And in this case, the house had Eleanor Whitmore watching the cameras, Jennifer working the floor, and me holding cards Grace didn't know were in play. 2 weeks until the wedding. Unless Grace managed to move it up. Either way, the storm was gathering. The question wasn't whether it would break, but how much damage it would do when it did. That night, I spread all the evidence across my small living room floor. Financial records, photos, letters, the real Margaret Foundation documents, Grace's employment records, the fake charity registration, years of Father's Day cards she'd signed "Love Always Grace" before deciding I was better off dead. Tomorrow, I'd start assembling packages for key people. Eleanor, Jennifer, Preston. The company Grace was stealing from. The authorities who handled wire fraud. Each package would contain different pieces of truth, timed to explode in sequence like controlled demolition. My daughter had built her house of lies tall and elaborate. But I'd learned in construction that the taller you build without proper foundation, the harder you fall. And Grace was about to fall from a great height. The storm was coming. Grace could feel it in Jennifer's questions, in the genealogist's doubts, in her company's sudden interest in auditing accounts. She was scrambling, trying to shore up walls built on sand. But you can't outrun truth forever, especially when truth has your father's patience, a private investigator's skill, a journalist's determination, and a grandmother's protecting instinct, all working in concert. 2 weeks. Maybe less if Grace got her way. Then, the storm would break, washing away lies like floodwater through a house built on false foundations. I picked up one of the old Father's Day cards. Grace's childhood handwriting, "To the strongest daddy in the world. Thank you for always fixing everything. I'm trying, baby girl." I whispered to the empty room. One last time, I'm trying to fix everything. Even if fixing meant breaking first. Even if saving her meant exposing her. Even if love meant letting her fall so she could finally learn to build true. The storm was coming, and after it passed, we'd see what was left standing. The week of the wedding arrived like a deadline I'd been both dreading and anticipating. My small apartment had transformed into a command center. Evidence boxes lined the walls, each labeled with its recipient, Eleanor Preston, Jennifer the authorities. The most important box, marked simply Grace, sat on my kitchen table. Marcus called with urgent news. "The audit's happening tomorrow. Grace must have gotten wind of it. She didn't show up for work today. Claimed she had wedding emergencies. She's running. Trying to. But here's the thing. She accessed the company system remotely last night. Tried to delete files. What she doesn't know is they'd already backed everything up and flagged her access. She just added destruction of evidence to her charges." I stared at the photo of Grace on my wall. Her college graduation, both of us smiling, Margaret between us, despite the chemo ravaging her body. That was the last photo where we all looked truly happy together. Carl arrived at my apartment that evening with updates from the country club. Final rehearsals in 3 days. Grace has been there non-stop, micromanaging everything. She's convinced Preston to skip the rehearsal dinner speeches. Says she wants the charity announcement to be a surprise at the wedding itself. She's eliminating variables. That's not all. She hired extra security. Showed them photos of several people she claims are stalkers or disgruntled former employees. Your picture's on top, but boss. She included Timothy Chen, the kid from her office she's been setting up. She knows he might come looking for answers once the audit reveals the theft. Carl handed me a folder. Managed to copy the security briefing. You're described as delusional man, claiming to be father, possibly violent, approach with caution. I laughed despite myself. 40 years in construction, never raised a hand to anyone, and now I was allegedly violent. Grace's lies had taken on their own life, growing wilder as her control slipped. That night, I made my final preparations. Into Grace's box went everything: photos from birth to college, every report card, every handmade gift, every I love you daddy note, but also the evidence of her crimes, her lies, her betrayal. The fake charity documents beside her mother's real final letters. The embezzlement proof beside her childhood drawings. I included a letter of my own. Grace. By the time you read this, everyone will know the truth. Not the story you invented, but the actual truth of who you are and where you came from. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because I failed somewhere along the way, to teach you that you were enough, just as you were. Your mother died believing you'd become someone special. She was right. You are special. Not because you marry money or wear designer clothes, but because you're Margaret Miller's daughter and my daughter. That should have been enough. I'll be at your wedding, not as a ghost or a stalker, but as your father. The one you couldn't kill with lies. I'll be there to watch you face the choice between continuing this charade or finally building something real. Whatever you choose, know this: I love you. I loved you when you took your first breath, and I'll love you when I take my last. Nothing you've done changes that. But love doesn't mean enabling lies. Sometimes love means being the wall that stops someone from driving off a cliff. Come home, Grace. Not to my apartment, but to yourself. To the truth of who you are. Dad. Jennifer arrived the next morning to collect the evidence packages. She looked exhausted, but determined. Grandmother Eleanor wants to meet with you before the wedding. Can you come to the estate tomorrow? Your brother will be there. Preston's at his bachelor party in Vegas. Won't be back until the rehearsal. Grace planned that too. Said she wanted him to enjoy time with his friends without wedding stress. Or she wanted him away while she handled last-minute fraud. That too. Jennifer loaded the boxes into her car. I've arranged for the company audit results to be delivered to Preston's hotel. He'll have them when he lands. The real charity information will reach the wedding guests through grandmother's network. She's quite skilled at strategic gossip. And Grace will receive your package the morning of the wedding, hand-delivered to her bridal suite. Jennifer paused. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no stopping it. It started the day she decided I was better dead than poor. We're just finishing it. The meeting with Eleanor Whitmore took place in her private study, a room that breathed old money and quiet power. She sat behind a desk older than my apartment building, studying me, with eyes that had seen decades of family dramas. Mr. Miller, or should I say Professor Clark? Sebastian is fine. Sebastian, then. Tell me what kind of man investigates his own daughter. The kind who raised her better than this. Eleanor smiled. Direct. I appreciate that. Do you know what I despise most about Grace's deception? The greed? No. The waste. She had you. A father who clearly loves her, who worked honest labor to provide. She had a mother who died with Grace. She had a foundation of truth to build on. Instead, she chose elaborate lies that will crumble at first stress. She wanted your life. She wanted our money. There's a difference. Eleanor pulled out a file. I've had my own investigators working. Did you know Grace has been married before? The words hit like a sledgehammer. What? Las Vegas, 6 years ago. A young man named Derek Sullivan. Divorced 8 months later when she discovered he'd lied about a trust fund. Apparently, he was just middle management at a bank, not an heir. She never mentioned it to Preston. My daughter had hidden an entire marriage. The lies went deeper than I'd imagined. That's bigamy if she doesn't disclose it, Eleanor continued, making her marriage to Preston invalid from the start, which voids any claim to Whitmore money. She leaned back. I protect my family, Sebastian. Your daughter targeted my grandson. But I believe Preston bears some fault. He wanted to believe in fairy tales. So I'll give Grace one chance. What kind of chance? At the ceremony before vows are exchanged, I'll ask if anyone knows of any impediment to this marriage. You'll stand. You'll identify yourself. What happens next depends on Grace. She can continue lying, and I'll destroy her completely. Or she can tell the truth and leave with some dignity intact. Why warn me? Because you're her father. You deserve to know the full stakes. Grace isn't just risking embarrassment or criminal charges. She's risking a vindictive old woman with unlimited resources and a very protective streak. I left the estate, feeling the weight of what was coming. Grace had schemed her way into a family that had survived generations by being smarter and more ruthless than their enemies. She thought she was the predator. She was actually prey. The rehearsal came and went without me, though Carl provided updates. Grace performed perfectly, the beautiful bride managing last-minute details. Preston had returned from Vegas, quiet and thoughtful. Jennifer's packages had reached him, but he went through the motions either in denial or planning his own revelations. The night before the wedding, I stood in my apartment looking at my only suit. The funeral suit would become a wedding suit. Both involved saying goodbye to someone I loved. My phone rang. An unknown number. "Dad." Grace's voice smaller than I'd heard since she was a child. "I'm here." Timothy Chen came to my apartment. Said you've been helping him. That you have proof I tried to frame him. "I do." Silence stretched between us. Then, "I can't stop it. The wedding, the lies, any of it. It's too late." "It's never too late to tell the truth, Grace. You don't understand. These people, if they find out, they already know." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "What?" "Eleanor knows. Jennifer knows. Preston suspects. The only person still pretending is you." "Then why haven't they stopped it?" "Because they're giving you one last chance to stop yourself. To choose truth over lies. To be Margaret Miller's daughter instead of whoever you're pretending to be." Grace was crying now. "I just wanted more Dad. More than secondhand clothes and community college and watching Mom die in a ward instead of a private room. Is that so wrong? Wanting more isn't wrong. But stealing it is. Lying for it is. Destroying others for it is." "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Yes, you did. Every lie was a choice. Every theft was a decision. Every time you told someone I was dead, you chose this path." "What do I do?" "Come clean. Tomorrow before you say I do, tell the truth. All of it. Face the consequences. Then rebuild honest." "I'll go to jail." "Maybe. But you'll go as yourself, not as this character you've created." Grace's breathing was ragged. Will you be there?" "I'll be there." "I'm scared, Dad." "I know, baby. But you're Margaret Miller's daughter. You're stronger than you think." She hung up without goodbye. I didn't know if she'd take my advice or double down on her deceptions, but I'd given her the truth. What she did with it would determine not just her future, but who she really was at her core. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect wedding weather. I put on my suit, pinned a white rose to my lapel, Margaret's favorite, and prepared to attend my daughter's wedding. One way or another, this elaborate construction of lies would end today. Whether it ended with Grace's confession or Eleanor's revelation, whether with handcuffs or just heartbreak, the false life my daughter had built was about to collapse. I looked at myself in the mirror. Not a Harvard professor, not a philanthropist, not a man who died saving orphans. Just Sebastian Miller, construction worker, widower father. It would have to be enough, because it was the truth. And today, one way or another, the truth would finally have its day. The morning of Grace's wedding arrived with the kind of crystalline perfection that made you believe in fresh starts. I stood outside the Whitmore Estates gates at 7 a.m., watching delivery trucks stream through with flowers, champagne, and enough food to feed half the city. Somewhere inside, my daughter was preparing to either marry into millions or confess to multiple felonies. My phone buzzed. "Jennifer, security has your photo at the gate. You're cleared for entry. Grandmother's orders override all others." The security guard barely glanced at his list before waving me through. Eleanor Whitmore's word was law here. I parked my old truck between a Bentley and a Tesla, its rust-spotted bumper, a declaration of everything Grace had tried to escape. Inside the estate, controlled chaos reigned. Wedding planners barked orders at staff. Florists arranged centerpieces worth more than my monthly rent. Musicians tuned instruments for a ceremony built entirely on lies. Carl appeared from a service corridor dressed in his maintenance uniform. "Boss, glad you made it. Grace is in the bridal suite 3rd floor. Been there since 5 this morning with her makeup team. Has she received my package?" "Delivered an hour ago." The courier confirmed she signed for it personally. Carl's expression was grim. Whatever was in there, it shook her. Her maid of honor came running out asking for scotch at 7 in the morning. I found a quiet corner in the estate's library to wait. Through tall windows, I watched the garden transform into a wedding venue. 300 chairs arranged in perfect rows. An altar decorated with white orchids that Margaret would have loved. A center aisle my daughter would walk down either in white satin or handcuffs. At 9, Eleanor Whitmore found me. She moved through her estate like a queen surveying her realm guests, and staff parting before her. "Sebastian, you came. My daughter's getting married. Where else would I be?" "Indeed." She settled into a leather chair across from me. "Preston knows everything. The embezzlement, the fake charity, the previous marriage she hid. He spent the night reading Jennifer's evidence." "Is he calling it off?" That would be the logical choice. But Preston, bless him, is a romantic. He wants to hear it from Grace herself. He's giving her the chance to confess before the ceremony. Eleanor's smile was sharp. Youth, so optimistic about redemption. "You don't believe in redemption. I believe in consequences. Grace stole from her employer. She defrauded our friends. She lied to my family. Redemption comes after punishment, not instead of it." Through the window, guests began arriving. Women in designer dresses, men in bespoke suits, the kind of people who'd never worked construction or worried about medical bills. Grace's fantasy family gathered to celebrate her fantasy life. "There's Timothy Chen," Eleanor noted, pointing to a young Asian man arguing with security. "The one Grace tried to frame. Jennifer invited him. Thought he deserved to see justice served." Justice. Was that what this was? Or just revenge, dressed in righteousness? At 10:30, Carl texted, "Preston just entered the bridal suite, alone." We couldn't hear what was said behind those closed doors, but 45 minutes later, Preston emerged, looking like he'd aged a decade. His groomsmen surrounded him, confused by his grim expression. He waved them off and disappeared into his own dressing room. "Showtime approaches," Eleanor said. "The ceremony is scheduled for noon, though I wonder if there'll be a ceremony at all." Jennifer joined us, dressed in pale blue silk. The audit results hit the business news an hour ago. Marketing executives suspected in 6-figure embezzlement. They haven't named Grace yet, but they will by evening edition. "How's Preston?" "Devastated, but determined to go through with this farce until Grace either confesses or commits to the lie." Jennifer turned to me. "I'm sorry. This can't be easy watching your daughter self-destruct." "She's been self-destructing for years. Today just makes it visible." At 11:45, the wedding march began. Guests took their seats chattering about the beautiful weather, the gorgeous venue, the romantic story of Preston and Grace. If only they knew the real story. I slipped into the back row, my funeral suit stark among the pastels. Several guests glanced at me curiously. Who was this nobody at the society wedding of the year? Security guards watched me, hands near their radios, ready to remove the dangerous stalker if needed. The groomsmen filed in, Preston at their head. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but hollow-eyed like a man attending an execution rather than his own wedding. His gaze swept the crowd and found me. A flicker of recognition. Jennifer must have shown him photos. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the ghost his bride claimed was dead. The music changed. Bridesmaids floated down the aisle in lavender silk, each probably wearing my month's salary. The maid of honor came last, still looking like she needed that morning scotch. Then the music peaked, and everyone stood. Grace appeared at the garden entrance, a vision in white that cost more than our old house. The dress was spectacular, hand-beaded cathedral train, a veil that seemed to float on air. She looked like a princess from Margaret's old fairy tale books. But I saw what others missed. The tremor in her bouquet. The too bright smile. The way her eyes darted across the crowd searching for threats. She knew the wolves were circling. The only question was whether she'd run or fight. She found me as she passed my row. Our eyes met for the first time in months. I saw terror there, and guilt, and something that might have been love buried under all the lies. I nodded once. "I'm here, baby girl. Whatever happens, I'm here." Preston took her hand at the altar, his grip looking more like restraint than affection. The minister began the traditional words about love and commitment, each phrase landing like an accusation. "Marriage is built on trust," he intoned. "On truth between two souls joining as one." Grace flinched. Preston's jaw tightened. The whole garden held its breath. "If anyone knows of any impediment why these two should not be joined in matrimony," the minister continued, "speak now or forever hold your peace." This was Eleanor's moment. She stirred in the front row, ready to expose everything. But I stood first. "I do." 300 heads turned. Security guards reached for their radios. The minister looked confused. "Sir," I walked down the aisle. I should have walked down as father of the bride. Each step felt like a mile, but I kept my eyes on Grace. She was frozen bouquet, shaking violently now. "My name is Sebastian Miller," I said clearly, voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "I'm Grace's father. The one she told you died saving children from a fire. As you can see, I'm very much alive." Gasps rippled through the guests. Phones appeared, recording the drama. Preston stepped back from Grace, giving her space to respond. "I don't—" Grace started, then stopped. The lie wouldn't come. Not with me standing there wearing the same suit from her mother's funeral, the white rose she'd always put in my lapel on special occasions. "Tell them," I said gently. "Tell them all of it. The truth will hurt less than more lies." Grace looked at Preston, at Eleanor, at the crowd of society people she'd tried so hard to join. Then, back at me. Her father. The construction worker who'd loved her unconditionally, until she'd decided conditional was better if it came with money. "This is my father," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "Sebastian Miller. He's not dead. He's not a Harvard professor. He builds things. Built things. He's just my dad." "Why?" Preston's voice was raw. "Why say he was dead?" Grace's facade cracked completely. Tears ruined her perfect makeup. "Because he didn't fit. Because I wanted to be someone else, someone who belonged in your world. Because I was ashamed of being a construction worker's daughter." "Tell them the rest," Eleanor commanded from her seat. "All of it." And Grace did. Standing at the altar in her princess dress, she confessed everything. The embezzlement. The fake charity using her mother's name. The previous marriage she'd hidden. Trying to frame Timothy Chen. The web of lies that had brought her to this moment. The crowd listened in horrified fascination. Some filmed, others whispered. A few looked ready to flee, as if Grace's crimes might be contagious. When she finished, silence filled the garden. Preston looked at the woman he'd almost married like she was a stranger. Which, in a way, she was. "I loved you," he said simply. "The real you would have been enough." Grace sobbed openly now, expensive mascara streaming. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Eleanor stood. "I believe we can all agree this wedding is canceled. Those who wish may proceed to the reception. The food shouldn't go to waste." But nobody moved. They were watching Grace collapse in on herself, the fantasy finally dead. I stepped forward and caught her as her knees gave out. My daughter in her stolen dress and borrowed life. finally stopped pretending to be someone else. "I've got you," I whispered. "Daddy's got you." Security moved in, but Eleanor waved them off. "Let them have this moment. The police will be here soon enough." I held Grace while she cried out months of fear and pretense. The wedding guests slowly dispersed, murmuring about scandal and social media. Preston disappeared without looking back, but I stayed holding my daughter in the ruins of her lies. "What happens now?" Grace asked between sobs. "Now you face the consequences. You'll probably go to jail. You'll definitely lose everything you stole. But then, when you've paid for what you've done, you get to rebuild. Honestly this time." Will you help me? I'm your father. That's what fathers do." The police arrived an hour later. Grace went with them willingly, still in her wedding dress. The last I saw was her being helped into the squad car train, bunched around her tiara askew. A fairy tale ending nobody writes. Jennifer approached as the police car pulled away. "Thank you for stopping her before she dragged Preston down too." "I didn't do it for Preston." "I know." She handed me an envelope. "From grandmother. She said you'd understand." Inside was a check for $500,000. The same amount I'd saved to give Grace. The same amount I'd spent on Margaret's medical bills. Eleanor's way of balancing scales. But there was also a note for the real Margaret Foundation, in memory of mothers who raise daughters to know better, even when they choose worse. I stood in the empty garden surrounded by $300 flower arrangements and abandoned dreams. Somewhere my daughter was being booked for multiple felonies. Somewhere Preston was mourning a woman who never existed. Somewhere Margaret rested in peace, probably disappointed, but not surprised. But here now, I held possibility. The check could fund the real foundation, help families facing what we'd faced. Grace's crime could become something good. Not redemption. Eleanor was right, that came after consequences. But a start. Carl found me there as the sun began setting. Hell of a wedding, boss. Not the one anyone planned. Nah, but maybe the one everyone needed. He looked at the empty altar. What now? Now we clean up, clear the debris, start building again. Think Grace will be okay. I thought of my daughter in a jail cell, probably still wearing remnants of her wedding makeup. Thought of the long road ahead. Trials, sentences, the slow work of rebuilding a life based on truth instead of fantasy. She's Margaret Miller's daughter, I said. She's stronger than she knows. 6 months later, I visited Grace in the minimum security facility, where she was serving a 2-year sentence for embezzlement and fraud. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by standard-issue khaki. The perfect makeup was just a memory. But for the first time in years, she looked like my daughter again. "How's the foundation?" she asked. "Good. We helped 130 families last quarter. Patricia Chen runs the day-to-day now." "Mom would like that." "She would." Grace picked at the plastic table between us. "I've been thinking about what I'll do when I get out. Maybe construction, learn the family trade." "You hated construction." "I hated a lot of things that turned out to be important." She met my eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. For all of it. For killing you off, for being ashamed, for choosing lies over love." "I know, baby girl." "Do you forgive me?" "I forgave you the day you were born. That's what parents do. We love, first forgive always, and hope our kids learn from their mistakes. Even mistakes this big, especially mistakes this big, they make the best teachers." We talked until visiting hours ended. About the future, about rebuilding, about the strange blessing of losing everything false so you can find everything real. When I left, Grace waved from behind the glass, and for a second, I saw the little girl who used to ride on my shoulders at construction sites wearing her tiny hard hat and believing her daddy could fix anything. Maybe I couldn't fix everything, but I'd helped her find her way back to truth. In the end, that's all any parent can do. The Margaret Foundation grew. Timothy Chen, cleared of all charges, became our youngest board member. Jennifer Whitmore served as legal counsel. Even Eleanor made donations her checks, always including notes about roots and foundations and the importance of building true. Preston married someone else, a pediatric nurse who'd never heard of Harvard but loved him for himself. They named their first daughter Margaret after reading about the foundation's work. Grace sent a congratulations card from prison. Preston didn't respond, but he donated to the foundation in his daughter's name. And me, I kept building. Not with concrete and steel anymore, but with second chances and stubborn hope. Grace was right that night in her luxury apartment. Margaret had wanted more for her, but not more things, or more money, or more lies. More truth, more love, more chances to build something real. In the end, that's what we got. Not the fairy tale wedding, or the society life, or the manufactured success. Just a father and daughter separated by bars, but connected by truth, rebuilding on foundations that would actually hold. It wasn't the life Grace had planned, but it was the life she needed. And sometimes that's the best gift a parent can give. Not what their child wants, but what will help them become who they're meant to be. Even if it means standing up at their wedding and exposing every lie they've told. Even if it means watching them trade a wedding dress for a prison uniform. Even if it means being the wall that stops them from driving off a cliff, knowing they'll hate you for it until they realize you saved their life. That's what love looks like. Not always pretty, not always painless, but always true. And in the end, true is all that matters. True is all that lasts. True is what Margaret would have wanted for both of us. So that's what we built, Grace and I, on the ruins of her elaborate deception. Something smaller, simpler, but infinitely stronger. A relationship based on truth. A foundation that would hold. A future worth building. One visiting hour. One honest conversation. One forgiven mistake at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey of heartbreak and redemption. If you've ever faced a situation where you had to choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. How do we rebuild when everything we've built is based on deception? What would you have done in my place? Or in Grace's? If this story touched you, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to hear more stories about the complex bonds of family, the price of deception, and the power of truth to set us free. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to stop pretending and start building something real. Until next time, remember, the strongest foundations aren't built on what looks good or what others expect, but on the simple, sometimes difficult truth of who we really are. May you always have the courage to build true, even when building false seems easier. With hope and determination, Sebastian.